Good afternoon for some of you, maybe still good morning for others. I see people coming in, and we'll give just a minute or so for everybody to make their way into the room. Hopefully, you want to be here to learn about Tier 1 database problem solving, and we welcome you here today. I'm Karen Elfner, and I'm from Clemson University and the Behavior Alliance of South Carolina. And my partner here today is Nicole Fintel, and she's from the Florida PBIS project out of the University of South Florida. So we're happy to have you here. And we'll just go ahead and get going. So we hope that by the end of this very brief session today, that you're able to start to come up with some ways that you can identify your problem, a priority, using both fidelity and outcome data, and that you can use those data to determine why the problem is occurring and to develop a data-aligned action step and evaluation plan. So we know that many teams collect data around Tier 1, but often struggle to do something useful with that data. So we often get stuck in admiring the problem, but how do we take that information and move forward? So we have a little poll because we want to know what kind of data you all are looking at. So Nicole, if you'll launch the poll. Which type of Tier 1 data are you most frequently looking at? And so we've got some options for you. Uh-oh. You want me to try to do
I
it?
can't, I'm having trouble finding the launch button when I'm
Oh,
sharing
I
my
got it.
screen.
There we go. So which type of data do you most often look at? Let's see, we've got them, they're rolling in now. We've got a lot of discipline data, some attendance data, some stakeholder surveys, which is wonderful, and then some others. And just a few people are saying they collect data, but not really using it. So that's kind of how it's shaking out. If you're using a different type of data than what we have in our poll, and you want to put that in the chat just to kind of give people ideas of some other types of data you might look at Tier 1, that'd be great. All right, well, thanks for giving us a little bit of here. I'm going to share those results so everybody can take a look at how the ratings came out. So you can see discipline data and attendance data being the most frequent. Oh, time out of class. Great. Academic and behavior data. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll proceed. So we know that there's some research that has identified what will help you to sustain your PBIS implementation. And these four components are involved when teams are sustaining. So we're checking for implementation, reviewing whether we're using the strategies or not. We're focusing on outcomes to identify our priorities, and we're doing targeted action planning using those outcome data to help us to decide which parts of our implementation interventions do we need to focus on and how do we need to monitor and adjust. So why do we collect data? Sometimes we're just mandated, right? There are requirements from the district or the federal requirements, but and some of those data are really important, but generally not as useful for making real-time decisions. So for school level problem solving, we need data that's going to help us to be able to define our problem in measurable terms. The more that you can clearly define the problem, the more you'll be able to develop an intervention that makes sense for that. We need to be able to diagnose and understand why the problem is occurring or root cause, and be able to track both how we're doing with putting our implementation of interventions in place, as well as the impact that that's having, so that we can continually improve. So there are a couple types of data that we use in our field. There's formative data, which is going to be our focus today, and then there's summative data. So we both are important, both play a valuable role. But we did want to make it clear that today's session is going to be focused on the formative. That's things happening during the school year to improve and adjust. The feedback's going to be more immediate, developmental, and it's going to guide your process. So the summative data that you would likely be using in our field would be something like the TFI, a comprehensive fidelity measure, maybe a walkthrough in addition to get some objective information, and then looking at outcomes like student referrals. So we do have some resources linked here, but also in the resource folder that would be valuable if you want to really focus in on your summative data, but that we're not going to really cover today.
So now I'm going to go ahead and shift into the core process that helps us and our teams move from the data to action planning. So this problem-solving framework might look familiar. It's grounded in decades of research and consultation, PBIS, and implementation science. And what's really important here is that this is a team process. So these are questions that are not meant to be answered by one person who's just looking at a report. The best decisions really happen when teams look at the same data, ask some structured questions, and they challenge assumptions together. One thing I wanted to name up front is that this process slows teams down on purpose. Many teams will jump straight from their data into action planning, and then they wonder why nothing's really changing. This framework here forces us to answer the right question at the right time. So that's what really increases the likelihood that your tier one will improve. And you'll see here I referenced on the slide a resource, the TIPS teaming resource. This resource really walks teams step by step through a similar data-based decision-making process, including roles, agendas, and other resources. So if you're looking for something concrete to guide your team meetings, that's a great place to start. And if you would like to go deeper, I saw that there's another session right after this one today at 2 o'clock that's focused primarily on that TIPS process. Okay, so I'm going to do this really briefly because we have a lot of engagement after the presentation today into step one of our problem solving process, which is problem identification. This isn't just about jumping to solutions, it's about clearly defining what we want students to know and be able to do and where performance isn't meeting expectations. So the purpose here is to define the scope of the problem in measurable terms that can connect it to a short-term goal. When teams do this well, the outcome is a clear problem statement and specific criteria for knowing whether the problem is solved. If the problem statement is fuzzy or not clear, then everything that follows will likely be a little bit fuzzy too. At tier one, we want to start broad. Teams should be looking at some of their universal data, such as maybe their early warning system indicators, attendance, academic data, office discipline trends, overall tier one benchmarks, like the percentage of students who have 0 or 1 referral. And we might also want to start disaggregating your discipline data here further using the big 5 questions. So describing the specific behaviors that you're seeing, when and where they occur, what students and staff are involved, and what has been the most common disciplinary response. And this helps us describe the problem accurately without necessarily explaining it yet. Okay, so this example shows what a strong tier one problem statement looks like. First, notice how the problem statement is written. It doesn't say students are being disruptive or our hallways are chaotic. Instead, it tells us exactly what's happening at that school. They are noticing that 40% of all of their office discipline referrals involve disruption and are occurring in their hallways. The ODRs are occurring most often during transition times. They involve 25% of 6th through 8th grade students who are enrolled at the school and are contributing at least 1 referral. So notice how specific it is. It names the behavior, the location, time of day, so during transitions, and the proportion of students involved. It also includes some short-term goals that's measurable and time-bound. They want to reduce the percentage of office discipline referrals in hallways to just 20%, and the percentage of students with an ODR for hallway disruption to 15%. And then they also include success criteria. So that involves implementing their strategies with high fidelity, monitoring their data weekly, and meeting those short-term goals. So this level of precision gives teams a shared understanding of what they're trying to change and how they'll know if they're successful. Once the problem is clearly defined, we move into step 2 of our problem-solving framework, which is problem analysis. This is where we ask, why is this happening? The goal is not just brainstorming or getting opinions. It's really about developing data-supported hypotheses about what is contributing to that problem. So strong analysis from teams here keeps them from recycling some of those same solutions year after year. In the problem analysis part of the framework, teams pool multiple data sources. This could include your PBIS implementation data like the TFI, maybe looking at some of the subscales of your TFI, as well as additional Big Five analyses. So teams might even apply the Big Five framework to specific behaviors or student groups. Additional data collection could include student and staff surveys, observations, maybe reviewing some documents. And we also encourage teams to consider the ICEL or ICEL domains when identifying data sources and developing their hypotheses. So under instruction, maybe asking what expectations are being taught. Are students getting regular feedback about their behavior? Curriculum, are lesson plans in place for teaching expectations and are procedures consistent across all settings? Environment, are expectations visible and clearly posted? And are adults supervising, responding consistently? And then the learner or the student, do students actually understand the expectations and are they motivated to meet them? So considering these domains can ensure that the focus really stays on the systems and practices in place. And then once data have been analyzed, the team should draft at least one hypothesis that explains the problem. And a good hypothesis will clearly link those conditions to outcomes. So if we changed this, then the problem would decrease because this is what is driving it. The statement becomes the bridge between your data analysis and your intervention planning in the next step. All right, so now I want to come back to that same example we used earlier in which the school team identified a problem statement related to disruptive behavior in hallways during their transition periods. So this team wanted to conduct some further analyses of their data, and they also collected some additional data. They did some observations and student and staff surveys. They found that most hallway referrals were near stairwells and in the gym, or near the gym. Tier 1 fidelity was below benchmark specifically in teaching expectations and responding to behavior according to the TFI. Their expectations were not visibly posted in those problem areas. And they saw through observation that supervision of those areas was limited. They did some surveys with students who reported riskier behavior when adults were not present. And they came up with a resulting hypothesis based on all of that information that is both actionable and focuses on adult practices and the environment. So things that they could change at Tier 1. Notice here what the hypothesis doesn't say. It doesn't label students as choosing to misbehave. It points to supervision, visibility, and instruction, which are system variables. If your hypothesis only asks students to change, you'll likely be jumping into Tier 2 and 3 supports without really strengthening your Tier 1. All right, so step 3 is where teams often want to start in the process, but it only works when it comes after steps 1 and 2. And this is where we specify the strategies, supports, and resources, and how we're going to collect data and the decision rules we will use to determine effectiveness. A common pitfall is writing plans that sound really great, but that don't specify who does what, when, and how often. So when that happens, we can't tell if a plan failed or if it was never truly implemented. And a comprehensive Tier 1 intervention plan addresses three elements. So prevention, adjusting the environment and routines, maybe teaching, explicitly modeling, practicing and providing feedback, and then responses or consistent reinforcement for appropriate behavior and predictable responses to challenging behavior. When these all align, your Tier 1 supports are much more likely to work for the majority of your students. All right, so this table shows how the hypothesis from our previous hallway example is translated into an action plan for the school. Each strategy, like increasing supervision in high traffic areas, explicitly teaching and reinforcing hallway expectations, and then adding visual cues, is paired with some supports, specific data sources, and decision roles. Notice that the school is tracking both outcome data, so they're going to be looking at the number of ODRs by location, and they're also looking at fidelity data, which in their case, it's the percentage of transitions that are being covered in the hallways and the number of reinforcement tickets being delivered. Finally, their decision rules protect teams from emotional decision making. Instead of this isn't working, we can say, based on our rules, this is what we want to do next. All right, finally, step 4 of our problem-solving process brings us back to the data, where we ask, is it working? And are we making sufficient progress towards our goal, and what do we do next? An important part of step 4 is examining the evaluation data using those decision rules that we established in step 3. So this matrix helps us stay objective by looking at our progress and fidelity data together. So if outcomes are strong and fidelity is acceptable, we're going to continue that intervention. If progress is questionable but fidelity is acceptable, we're going to continue with some minor modifications. If progress is poor but fidelity is acceptable, we're going to go back to steps 2 and 3 and revisit our hypothesis and intervention plans. And then finally, if fidelity is low, we can't determine the intervention's effectiveness. And that's not necessarily a failure, that's actually valuable information. It tells us that we might need to provide additional supports for the implementation or consider alternative plans that address our hypotheses that might be more feasible to deliver with fidelity. Okay, so coming back to the hallway example here, the PBIS team here collected weekly data for their first month of implementation. We can see hallway ODRs are decreasing, fidelity of implementation, which is measured through staff presence during transition, and those reinforcement tickets delivered. They started out very high, but they began to slip in week 4. And without both data sets, the team might assume down the line that their strategy stopped working at a certain point. But the real story here is that the plan appears to be effective and sustaining implementation might need some attention. And I see a question in the chat about how often this process occurs. Often our teams will meet once a month, but they're still collecting data weekly and each month coming through, going through the process together to look at how things are coming out of their data. And often we say plan a short-term goal. In the example I'm going through, their short-term goal was at the end of the semester, this is what we'd like to see. Based on the decision rules I just outlined on the previous slide, the team doesn't abandon their plan. They make some targeted adjustments. They send out some quick staff reminders for the post assignments. They provide additional exemplars of what on-time, on-task transitions look like, and they do a reteach of hallway expectations. And then they continued with the weekly data review to see how their progress is looking. All right, so that brings us to the end of our quick overview of the Tier 1 problem-solving process. We focused on how teams can move from data to problem identification, analysis, action planning, and evaluation. At this point, we're going to shift into the next part of our session. And instead of moving into a completely open Q&A, we designed an activity that gives you a chance to apply those concepts to a case study. So we're going to use the same steps and questions that we just walked through together with a new set of data and circumstances. And as we transition into this next discussion, we're going to stop the recording to hopefully support more open conversation and collaboration.